What is going on, guys? So it is the start of college football. Now, we've had week 0 games, but Georgia starts playing on Saturday. So what I wanted to do was run through Georgia's regular season schedule and give you predictions for those games, give you a little bit of insight, timing, when games are going to be played, the weather, things of that kind of stuff. So let's jump in. Georgia starts off with Tennessee Martin, Saturday, September 2nd. Carson Beck comes in as QB1. The running back room is a little banged up right now. Branson Robinson out for the year. But I think this was the Oklahoma game that was no, Ball State was the Oklahoma game that was rescheduled. So UT Martin is the home opener. Going to be a 6 o'clock game on September 2nd. Georgia will have some growing pains. That just happens when you come into a new quarterback. You're looking at a whole new season. This isn't last year's team. Jalen Carter's not there. The defense has to restructure a little bit. The offense has to restructure a good bit. So there will be some growing pains, but Georgia gets it done. I think they win by at least 14. I'm not going to go too much over that just because of everything that they have to work out in the first couple of weeks. I think it'll be that way. Also, Todd Monken is gone, so you're looking at Mike Bobo and seeing what he's going to do with the offense. So I'm going to say probably Georgia around 21-28, and Martin probably scores 10, like 28-10, 21-10, something along those lines. The Georgia defense identity still holds to me that they don't want people to score. And they've done really well the last 2 years that way. I think that holds true here, but I don't think the offense, you're not going to see, 65 points. I don't think that is where we're at in this part of the season. So starts off 1-0, and then we go to Ball State on September 9th. That is again in Athens. Still pretty warm weather. I think it's a game kind of like Tennessee Martin, but you get a little bit more traction from the offense, so you're looking at 31 points, 35 points, around there, maybe more. Ball State, again, probably 10 or under points is where I'm looking at. So starts off the season 2-0. They take more chances here to really try to get everybody in rhythm before the next game, which is South Carolina on September 16th. Now, this is in Athens, which is helpful, but South Carolina beat Georgia in Athens in 2018? No, 2019? Maybe. One of the last games that I absolutely remember Georgia losing to South Carolina in Athens was when Rodrigo missed like 3 or 4 field goals. It was just an off game for Georgia. And the way South Carolina looked with Spencer Rattler at the end of the season last year, taking down Tennessee, taking down Clemson, you're looking at those kinds of things. Now, I know they've got a whole new team as well, but Rattler's back. Beamer ball comes to Athens. This is a trap game. Very much so. This is not going to be an easy game. I think Georgia pulls it out. I think that Kirby calls for the crowd to get involved. This is the 3:30 game. Get Sanford loud. I think that affects them a bit, but I think this is South Carolina will put up some points. I think if Georgia can keep them under 21, then Georgia wins. I think this is like a 28-31 points for Georgia to like a 17-21 points to South Carolina. Yeah, that's where I'm leaning. Is Beamer ball does lose, but it is a close game. I would not be surprised if this is 31-28, 35-32, something along those lines either. Just because it's so early in the season, I know what Rattler can do. And, you're just opening up the season. You've got 2 opponents before this, but this opens up SEC play. SEC is hard football. So, we're starting off with 3-0. Should do well, but that is a trap game. Georgia needs to pay attention to South Carolina. Then you get into UAB. I think the emotions of the South Carolina game, they can look a little discoordinated in the first quarter. This time has not been set yet But Georgia eventually pulls away, especially in the second half. I think it's a low-scoring game in the first half. Georgia puts up 14. UAB may get a touchdown, may get a field goal. And then Georgia starts to pull away. In the second half, ends up, maybe 42 points, 35 points. And UAB ends with 2 touchdowns, maybe. And then the fifth game, which is Georgia at Auburn. And the Deep South's oldest rivalry always hits. It doesn't matter if Auburn is unranked, doesn't matter what they've played before. They usually play Georgia well. So I think that it's hard for me to determine. I think the talent gap between where Auburn's at and where Georgia's at right now will eventually hit. I think that hits middle of the third quarter, but it's a close game for a half. Absolutely. I mean, I've seen Auburn hang with very, very good teams when they were a 4-loss team, and you've seen what they've done with Alabama. You've seen what they've done with Georgia in the past. And then playing in Auburn, that stadium will be packed. I would not be surprised if that's a night game just to give Auburn a night game. It may end up being a 12 o'clock game, but I'm not sure. And then we come back to Athens. Oh, Auburn. Georgia should win that. They should. I'm not going to say pull away, but you'll just notice the difference in talent. It's probably a 10-point win versus Auburn on September 30th. Come back home to Athens, and you've got Kentucky. This was a low-scoring game last year. I think it's a low-scoring game this year. You're looking at 24-14. Dogs on top because we're in Athens. Love that. On October 7th. Then we go to October 14th, Georgia at Vandy. We don't know if it's going to be in Commodore Stadium yet, or it's going to be where they're playing to open the season, where they played with Hawaii. This should be a rout for Georgia, probably a 3-touchdown win. Vanderbilt played Hawaii well, but they looked a little sloppy in week 0, plus the moving around for Vanderbilt, all these things is an outside interference, and Georgia should be dialed in by this point. I'm expecting Carson Beck to be well within the system, and we'll get a glimpse, and more of a glimpse, of what Mike Bobo's going to do to the offense. And then the cocktail party. Georgia, Florida, in Jacksonville. And I think this will be closer than the last couple of years, but Georgia pulls this one out as well to go to 8-0. Again, Florida, Billy Napier's got to get his players in. He's only in his second year. They lost some to the NFL. They're having a little bit of a culture problem down there in Florida. So, or not problem, they got to find their identity under Napier. They didn't get it last year, and that takes time. That's all that is it just takes time to figure out who and where and what. But I think Georgia handles Florida in Jacksonville. It's always a close game. The cocktail party's always close. You always play harder. If you've watched Swamp Kings, you saw that during the TiVo years, won in 06, Florida did. Then Georgia wins in 07 after that huge celebration. And then Florida absolutely thumped Georgia in 08. So this is a heated rivalry, always a big game. It's always set at 3:30. The cocktail party's been at 3:30 for as long as I can remember. And that's on October 28th. So between Vanderbilt and Florida, Georgia has a bye week on the 21st. So we're going into the Missouri game at 8-0. Missouri comes to Athens after last year's squeak of a victory, 26-22 over Mizzou. I think Georgia wants to prove a point. I think they remember that game. Jalen Carter getting into some arguments pregame, and then them going after his knee in the game itself. Jalen getting hurt. I think Georgia remembers this. So Georgia wins. I think they kind of impose their will a little bit and run it up just a bit because we're in Athens. It's a cold game because we're already in November. That's probably a 12 o'clock game, but I would not be surprised if it was 7:30. So keep an eye out for the time difference. I think Georgia does better at night than they would at noon against Mizzou in that game. Then we're going on to November 11th. Ole Miss at Georgia. I like Lane Kiffin. I like what he does with the offense. We had Mississippi State last year. Looked at that team. I actually went to Starkville and enjoyed that game. So I'm really looking forward to Ole Miss. So Oxford comes to Athens. And Kirby and Lane Kiffin have worked in the college football realm a lot. I think Kirby pays attention, especially from a defensive side, looking at Kiffin's offensive-minded schemes. Again, I think it's a little bit of a talent discrepancy here. Plus, we're in Athens. Again, Georgia's schedule is not the hardest in the country by far. They get a lot of their big games at home. This is one of those big games I'm excited to see because we don't get to see Ole Miss at Georgia a lot. So Georgia, I think, wins this one by 14 to improve to 10-0 on the season. And then the game. Georgia's game of the whole season comes to Georgia going to Tennessee. You've got Heupel's offense. You've got Joe Milton coming in with a cannon for an arm. And we saw what Rocky Top did to Alabama last year. Now, it took the crowd and the offense and this. Defense, not so much, like Alabama was able to score, but Tennessee was able to score with them. Plus, the noise. I think the noise is going to get to the Georgia offense a little bit. The good thing about this is it is game 11, but this will be the most hostile, the loudest they've been, especially at away game, since Auburn. And this is a toss-up, you know. Last year, the only thing we can compare it to was Tennessee-Alabama. What I will say is Tennessee will have already played Alabama, and I think they lose that game. Tennessee will have already played South Carolina, and that is up in the air. I'm still debating between South Carolina and Tennessee on that game, but with a loss, it's kind of like a need for Tennessee to win the game. So this is the closest game. I'm going to say Georgia gets the dub. They won at Tennessee 2 years ago. There wasn't as much hype around Tennessee 2 years ago. I get that. But Georgia's going to be ready. They don't really have a hangover from Mississippi State. There's not a lot of emotion in that, I don't think. This will be the emotional game, and I think Georgia pulls it out. I think you've got Carson Beck with 10 games under his belt. The running back room should be healthier at this point. The defense should be cohesive. They had a great game plan last year, and hopefully the game plan works that they come up with. It's not going to be the same one because Hendon Hooker is not there. They gamed for Hendon Hooker and Jalen Hyatt, but the scheme of the defense, I think Kirby will have them ready, but it will be a close game. They're going to score. Because last year the rain did affect the scoring. Tennessee is a throw the ball a lot. The rain messed with that, but they did put a lot of pressure on the QB. I think that's where they go again, is put a lot of pressure on the QB in the same way where I say that it helps Georgia to be the 11th game of the season. It also helps Tennessee. It gives them all those games to get ready, but they have spent more emotion, probably trying to get payback at South Carolina, the game going to Tuscaloosa. So I think they've spent a little bit more of their emotion, and Georgia gets the dub, walks out of Neyland with a win and an 11-0. Now, that's going to take a lot of their emotion, and then they have to go to Georgia Tech. So the last 2 games of the year will be away games. It's going to look fairly sloppy at Tech for the first half, and then, again, the talent between Tech and Georgia will show. Georgia pulls away in the second half, wins, but don't freak out in the first half when Georgia's not playing all that great after the very emotional game at Tennessee on the 18th. That puts Georgia at a 12-0 season. They've done the regular season 12-0 for 2 years in a row. I think they do it a third year and go into the SEC championship. We will talk about who goes into the SEC championship because I'm going to do a few of these within the SEC. I'll do Tennessee's schedule. I'll do Alabama, LSU, and a couple of other teams outside the SEC. But when we get to that, I'll do a special on SEC championship and those things. But there you go. There you have it. Georgia goes 12-0 for the third straight year in the regular season. If you agree with me, don't agree with me, keep it clean in the comments, guys. I'm always down to debate. I'm always down to look at things. I try to look at it mostly objectively. If we were to look at worst case scenario for Georgia, I think worst case would be a loss at Tennessee, a loss to Florida, maybe. But I would not be surprised if they lose to South Carolina and Tennessee. If they lost to Florida, I'd be a little surprised. But South Carolina coming in and they just play a sloppy game early in the season. That's worst case scenario is 10-2. And I think in that you're looking at Tennessee would go on to win the East, but I don't think so. I think once they get past South Carolina, their next biggest challenge is going to be Tennessee. So keep it clean in the comments, guys. If you haven't yet, subscribe. Scroll down there and do that for me. We'll keep up with as much college football as I can. We'll also be doing NFL when that starts. I've already drafted for fantasy. If you have, share your draft results down there, man, because mine did not go great. So let me know. Let me know how your fantasy football's going. Keep it locked in here for other stuff and or college football, NFL football. Cannot wait. And keep it locked in on the channel for other teams as well. So, Fam Jam, until next time, I'm out.